Welcome to this two-part podcast in which we'll be celebrating 40 years of the wonderful work of Socitm. As most of you will know, Socitm is a leading membership charity whose purpose is to inspire local government professionals to innovate and to modernise local government services by harnessing technology. It's where you and your services can reach out and access the cybersecurity information, the advice and the practical tools you'll need to be able to stay secure. Whether this is specific training, consultancy, or even a custom program. So Socitm exists to support you and the services that your agency provides. So go to socitm.net and you can check out the wealth of resources available to support you and your public service. So welcome everybody, my name is Daniel Kremin from Civico and you've tuned in to the Govtech show where we look at all things related to technology as it relates to local government and government services. And today we're involved in a two-part special, which is we're looking at the role of Socitm within local government and local government services. And towards that, we've got two key people from Socitm. I've got with me Dave Sanderson, who is the Member Services Director, and we've got Dave Ogden, who is the Engagement Director. So perhaps we'll just get straight into it. If we could just ask Dave to introduce yourself and your particular role with regards to Socitm.
Of course you can. Daniel, thank you very much. So Dave Sanderson, I'm the Director of Member Services at Socitm, so playing a vital role when it comes to our member organisations, both regionally, nationally and internationally.
And David, if you could introduce yourself and your role within Socitm.
Thanks, Daniel. It's David Ogden. I'm the Director of Engagement at Socitm. And that really means that I focus on our members in terms of responding to them, their challenges, and making sure that what we do, we communicate clearly and effectively. I also spend a great deal of my time understanding the challenges they face through various channels they'd expect, so our social media, podcasts like today, to really, as I say, make sure that we respond effectively and efficiently and support the sector in the best way we can.
That's great. And just from a general point of view, if I was new to the council, and most people would have heard the term Socitm, but what is Socitm and what role does Socitm play within local government and local government services? Who would like to have a go at that first?
So I can pick that up. Daniel. So, Socitm, and many won't necessarily be aware that has been going 40 years next year. So it's playing a pivotal role across local government and, to be fair, wider sector. The Socitm, the acronym, if you like, of that, it's the Society for Innovation, Technology and Modernisation. So it's one of the preferred networks out there for professionals looking at shaping and delivering public services. So this is across both local authorities, both health, academia, housing, you name it. It's open to both public, third, academic sectors. And as I said, there's not many that realise that we're a small but mighty organisation. And we've been around nearly 40 years now and support circa 300 member organisations which span across close to 5,600 individuals that get the value out of working with us.
I think if you want to think about our mission, Daniel, we've got three aims to build on what Dave said from my perspective. It's to help maximise the effective use of technology and data to deliver services and improve outcomes for the public benefit. And that's really important. The outcome focus is on the people and places that our members serve. To help members develop professionally, so we've got a number of leadership academy courses that cover best practice, deliver technology innovation, and help sort of data-enabled transformation and change. And then provide a range of resources and services to help public service organisations and communities develop and deploy technology to take advantage of innovation to create ultimately better services for, as I say, the places and communities that our members serve.
Wow. Okay. And Dave, do you know much of the history, the evolution of Socitm, and how you actually got to this place where you're at now? So I just heard the program of work that you do, but how did we actually get here? You know, how did it evolve?
So Socitm was formed, as I said, now close to 40 years ago, and it was originally around that focus of IT, so that Society for IT Managers. But naturally, as we know, it's much more than just IT. As much as IT is extremely important, and covers to what David just alluded to there, it's around focusing on that inclusive approach. And bringing this together, so we're not just segregating this into certain individuals, departments within that organisation. So it's making sure there's an inclusive approach that fits all. Everything we do is for public good, and you know, to that effect, we've therefore then changed and evolved as we've gone. You know, we've got stronger as the organisation. As matured, and therefore obviously that use of innovation, technology and modernisation is everything that everyone out there is delivering against. And again,
Yeah.
to David's point, and so much so that everything we do is for the public good, and we're delighted that we've therefore then been recognised as a registered charity by the English Charity Commission. And to be able to then take us to that next level. It's something that was very much a dream from the get-go. But it's a significant hurdle for us, and something that we're moving forward at pace on since that announcement.
Wow. And just looking in general terms, we're going to get into the detail presumably in a short while, but just in the general terms, what would you say is the state of government technology at the moment? So what are the key issues that you're finding as you interface with different departments across local government? What are the key themes that are coming out?
Big question. It's got a big answer. I think the current
I would imagine
that
AI is obviously coming out as a real challenge.
I think we're going to end up talking about AI at some point, as every conversation is at the moment. But I think going back a step, the current state of play, what we are seeing is there's a couple of key points. One, the collaboration, that's really difficult to do. And we work with stakeholders at Socitm to really provide what's needed in terms of a resource for our members, because they're overwhelmed by information and resources and where to go to next. So that's one issue that we work hard. The other one is that there is a stop-start of digital across the sector. So people are in very different places. IT is seen as a cost center, and it needs to be seen as a value driver. And the local government reorganisation that's going on at the moment is a potential to change that and look at how we do things differently, because we need to do things radically differently. There's not going to be any more money. There's not going to be any more capacity. So what are we going to do differently? And that then requires sort of a third area for me in terms of a culture around leadership and expecting more from the leaders in that director level and C-suite that goes beyond IT, but understands the technical capabilities of what this new innovation can potentially do to radically do things differently. But in order to do that, IT needs a seat at the table. We don't need to create any more CIOs or CDOs. What we do need is to have the influence at the right level. So no longer it's abrogated to the IT section. That's IT, digital's IT. It's not. It's part of the leadership makeup now. So if I'm going to be really controversial, perhaps those, and I wouldn't want their job because they've done a phenomenally good one in incredibly difficult circumstances. They may have been, hired on the basis of their ability to cut and reduce budget. We've got to look at what that leadership is now for the next, if we've been around 40 years, what the next 40 years looks like, and how we develop leaders that can take advantage of essentially, a digital infrastructure first that is outcome focused. And that's quite different to where we are now, I think. So there's sort of the key issues I see in the sector right now, Daniel.
Well, in the same vein as that if you are a leader within local government, how do they interface with you? So how does that relationship come about? So do they have a need that they then respond to you, or do you have a dialogue? Do you have structures through which you're able to engage with leaders across various departments and sections and sectors, etc.? How does that work?
I think Dave can come on to this in a bit more detail, because it's more his area in terms of how the events and the channels there. But there are a number of opportunities that we can offer, from a real small scale roundtables that we have at that senior level to the more middle management level. But effectively, what's really important here is everything that we do is independent and neutral. And that is really important, because it's a safe space to work out. And one of the things that we're probably not good at as a sector is the collaboration and understanding and learning from what's gone before. The will is there. It's a phenomenally open and transparent look at what we've done, but actually going and knowing where to go to get that done, that's where Socitm has a key role, and we're critical in pulling that conversation together, as I say, in a safe space that's independent and it's neutral, and that's something we really hold really dear. And Dave, I don't know if you want to come on to a bit more sort of detail about that.
Yeah, sure, and echo that in terms of it is very much that safe space, Daniel, and I think that's the key part. You know, we're trusted with individuals, with organisations, and you know, I'm fortunate that I'm able to have several different elements of conversations, you know, with the great work that the individuals and the sector, you know, is doing. We've seen the phenomenal work, and especially if somebody had have said many years ago, you could move all of your public services online, everyone would laugh. But look at the phenomenal work and the utilisation of technology in order to do that. So I think there's a variety of elements, because collaboration is very much that at the forefront of this, in terms of we speak about at Socitm about standardise, simplify, standardise and share, and within that it comes with building those networks, sharing, collaboration. And that's one good thing around the agile way in which we work now, both from a virtual and an in-person perspective, is that we can share now more wider, so you're not having to be there in person to be able to do that. So it is around those events, you know, whether it's those small localized regional events, so really getting to the hooks of what's relevant and topical, not just in sector but in that locality, in that community that our members serve. What is important, because what could be important in one region, as much as it is vitally important in another region, there could be a different level of journey on that. So there's got to be a nuance in terms of how we can help bring this to life. So
what I like from what you're saying is you're talking about a relationship rather than a transaction. And I found that in my, you know, we're in a very small area of local government tech, and what we find is the alignment between what the department or the team or the organization needs, rather than just looking at tech to solve those problems. First of all, you have to have that interaction with people to look at the problem, to explore the problem. And I think that's what you're saying, is that dialogue is critical to Socitm and your particular approach as to how you get alongside your partners and how you can work together to find solutions and the relevant tech, rather than just tech for tech's sake. It's about what are you trying to achieve, what's your aims, what's your outcomes that you're looking for, and how does Socitm help them to build. From what I'm hearing, have I got that right? Is that correct?
Yeah, very much so. You know, tech is so powerful, but it's so fast moving. As we you know, as we sit here talking today, it's going to change again, and it'll keep changing. Technology is much more than just that enabler, and it is exactly that. It's to leverage those trusted partners. So, you know, we work very closely with the supplier community. You know, I'm fortunate that I've been a part of that prior to joining Socitm close to 6 years ago now. And it's very vital that we build and bridge that gap between public and private sector in terms of those relationships, because, you know, there's some great technology that can help deliver, give a return on investment, a return on value. But it is exactly to that point, Daniel. It's much more than just a transaction. It is building those relationships. And for me, building a relationship is a return on investment, because that in itself can then help leverage and work alongside others.
Yeah. And thinking, if I'm a member of Socitm and I look for support, I'm looking for resources, then I know that Socitm is very heavily involved in events and insights and peer networks, which is what you've described. But if I'm a member, what sort of benefits can I look to leverage from my relationship with Socitm?
So there's a variety of different angles, and David, I know you'll come into it from that engagement perspective. There's a variety of different angles, Daniel, that can do this. And what I will probably say here is that although the benefits, go and span across a vast array of what we do, each organization and how they utilize and maximize those benefits is different. So I'll give you a couple of examples in terms of it. So the events that we reference both locally and nationally, is key. That's key for that in-person networking, collaboration, and sharing firsthand and really sort of getting back into that. We need those interactions. That is how the sector can thrive, and how it can learn off one another. So having those there is vitally important. In addition, we run a series of webinars throughout the year. And it's not about the number of the webinars, it's around the topic, the relevance that webinar gives to an individual, to a department, or to the wider organization. We've touched on AI as an example there. If there's something taking place, whether it's Socitm-led, whether it's supplier-led, or whether it's further alliance-led through some of our central government agencies and partners, it's how that can then, you can take the learnings from that webinar and implement them or help to embed them within your organization, whether that's helping to create a business case or whether it's actually, this is something we're looking at doing. And what I will probably say is it's also learning from others' mistakes, if you like, is vitally important back to that share standardized element of this. If someone's done some fantastic work, you're going to come with challenges, you're going to come with the benefits. But some of those challenges can actually be a significant saving for other organizations looking to go down that particular route. So that's where all of our webinars can therefore then identify. But two of the unique areas that can really benefit on this, Daniel, is our member-only resources. So you can go onto our website and you can view a number of resources there that is open to public viewing, just as any other website is. But there's a significant amount of resources that are there for our members. So when our members log in, when they're going through that trusted platform, they log in, they get access to a variety of insightful, impactful, and accessible thought leadership pieces. This can be then identified within their organizations. It can be helping to identify the skill gaps that are coming about. It can help in terms of that business case and what is it that we look and need to do and achieve. So working backwards, what is our outcome? And that's one of the key things. It's an outcome. It's outcome driven. So what is the outcome of that organization? And let's bring it back and let's look at how Socitm can help us get to that outcome, if you like. And the other area of this, and it's something that our chief exec, Nadira, has been so pivotal in terms of bringing to life how we can do this, is around our learning development, our leadership academy. So this is a unique set of programs and courses that can help to harness and develop not only just individuals, but again, wider teams. From a managerial level, from a variety of different angles. And this is something that, again, is very unique, coupled with the member resources, can really actually help drive a good career pathway. It can also help actually take that resource and putting it into practice in a variety of different ways. And as I said, this can impact as individuals or teams within that organization as well.
I can give you a very practical example of that. I was writing a report on technology within council chambers and committee rooms, and Socitm wrote two really good detailed reports over the last 18 months, which highlighted how technology has shifted and changed over the last 3 to 4 years, and that how council officers are often using legacy equipment which solved a problem during COVID. It may have solved a problem post-COVID, but actually then starts, because it's the wrong technology trying to deliver the wrong outcome, that actually it can have impacts on stress, on workflows, and all of those. They were really, really useful. So as a supplier, I went into your archives and I found those two really good reports, which enabled me to articulate to our clients what sort of technologies they might want to be thinking about, and what's the impact of working with technology that's just drifted out of date. It wasn't bad 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's not necessarily bad now, but it's making for inefficient workflows and processes and procedures, etc. Really, really interesting. And David, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that theme?
I just wanted to add, because we were at the top of this, and I talked about, wanting to understand and listen to our members to make sure we respond appropriately, and I think this sums it up really well. We are led by our members for our members. So, just to expand on what Dave said, just to give a few more examples. In the resource hub, Dave mentioned that we've got the member-only resources, which is absolutely, a jewel in the crown for us. So, for example, we've had an AI governance policy, draft policy that our members have helped us create. These are the things that we need to consider. And we've deployed that, and that's been used by so many other councils that they've adapted and adopted for their own purpose, and that's probably saved them, thousands in people hours, taking the complexity out and allowed to sort of get a level playing field at the start of a 10 that we've done the heavy lifting for. So that's a good example that's behind the paywall for members. But there are things that people, do have a look at. So I'd encourage listeners to go and have a look at some of the resource hub collateral. AI at Socitm, there is lots of detail on there that is free. You don't have to be a member. Come and have a look at what we're doing there, because there's some really good thought leadership. There's some resources that you can download and adopt that are free. So I would encourage people to have a look at that. And the final bit in terms of the thought leadership, because we do want to be thought leaders in the space, it's great to get responses from our members, and one of them, which has absolutely caught fire in terms of a blog this year, is from North Yorkshire, and that focused around their journey of effectively becoming a number of councils into one, to North Yorkshire Council. And that was, if I knew what I know now, then this is what I would do differently. And that really struck a chord. It absolutely cut through with all the clutter on LinkedIn and all the other blogs out there. People were really, really welcoming of this concept, because it was an honest, human appraisal of the situation. This is the stuff that went on. This is what I would do differently now. And I think, something like that, it was so well received that's the sort of thought leadership space that we create and create that space for our members to contribute.
Well, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you both about how Socitm, enables councils and partners to drive better digital outcomes, and that you've just described a really good example. Is there another one that listeners would be able to lock onto as a particularly good example of working with Socitm to deliver outcomes?
The other good example, and Dave touched on it earlier, that with the leadership training, because again that's a key component of our membership, is work that we did with Sheffield City. Now, they bespoke some leadership, and they used their leadership benefits to bring a consistency within their teams, to put them all through what we call our Top Talent program. There's a number of programs that we have. Top Talent is one of them. Empowering Women is another. But Top Talent in this case was used to create a level playing field, if you like, for all the people in the digital team. And that allowed the director then to really be quite confident in the empowerment and the delegation, because he knows what training his people have been through, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
it does.
that was, on a case by case basis, we're able to tailor specific detail for teams if that's required, and that allows them to really a cost effective way of bringing people through a program that is ultimately delivered by the people that are in the sector, and it's been developed by people from the sector. So it's not an outside.
So that sounds like, yeah. So not only do you have programs on the shelf, but you're also able to design custom programs to meet specific needs for better digital outcomes.
Yeah, and we've just delivered another one with Norfolk, and that was a combination of some elements of the different programs that we offer, because that's what was required, and we're able to do that, and that the credibility then and positivity towards those courses, because they're not off the peg, they're not sold by a supplier. As I say, they're designed by the sector for the sector, because we understand the challenges, and that's really important, and that's a real unique selling point, if you like, if you want to put it in those terms.
Right. And Dave, if I could ask you, in terms of the networks, building a culture of collaboration, what would be the role of regional and national forums and perhaps peer-to-peer knowledge sharing? To what extent does Socitm support that process?
So I think in that, and again, one of the things we're about, Daniel, is let's not reinvent the wheel. There's some great work being done. Let's collaborate. And again, that's areas where we can collaborate. Exactly that. What forums are being more widely recognised? What forums are being in the region? We can look at the warning, advice, reporting points as an example. The WARPs around the cyber element of that. As much as many years ago, cyber was a specific policy area within that Socitm space. And David alluded to the AI at Socitm. We've also got cyber at Socitm, and it's around where we can complement those that are undertaking the work of cyber within that space. So it's how can we work and connect. So a number of our member organisations will be members of their localised and regionalised WARP. But if we're putting on those local meetings, it's great that we can actually get updates from the WARPs in terms of that, and also likewise updates from other forums that take place within the region, because it's vitally important that everyone gets to learn about and share what's out there, and where one organisation can actually work alongside another organisation to deliver better outcomes on that. A number of colleagues throughout Socitm are also involved in different forums, in different boards and so on. As an example, I'm part of the team on iStand UK, so focusing on data standards for local government, as an example. So it's plugging into all of these areas, and all of these areas and forums represent areas that our members are having the challenges with. David alluded to there, what Sheffield did from that bespoke aspect. That's a brilliant example of where a membership and a benefit of working with Socitm has given a return on investment, whether it be cashable or resource-led, and it's also shown a return on value. But what necessarily works for Sheffield in that instance will be slightly different and nuanced for other organisations, and we're in that real credible space where we can do that. So it can be an off-the-shelf. This is for example, managing, motivating hybrid teams. That's a huge thing, and a new skill set to many coming into sector. It just shows that there's a variety of angles, and how we can then plug these in, Daniel, with other networks and forums is vitally important, because if we can collaborate together, we could become a better voice for public service delivery, and therefore then it gives that further credibility to members. Actually, we need to be leaning on organisations such as these.
I quite like that. Again, from my own experience, just looking at things like the difference between Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, and what does 27,001 and 9,001, what do they actually mean, rather than just being titles and things that people tick off? because they've got to do it from a supplier's point of view, because you want the work and you want to meet the criteria for a tender document, but actually seeing those from our point of view as drivers of quality, and particularly with the Cyber Essentials Plus, seeing that as a driver of security, particularly when you're looking at local governments, and we know that there's a big uptick in terms of cybercrime that happens, and making sure that not just that you've got a certificate, but that actually people know what that certificate means and how does it support. And so the forums, so we have our own forums around there, and I believe that some of our team have actually had some interaction with Socitm down the years, which has led to that. So in the AV industry, I think there's a fairly good relationship between Socitm historically and the AV industry, and how do we bring in those key things. And in next week's episode of the Govtech Show, we'll continue to celebrate 40 years of Socitm's work by looking closer at the what, the when, and the how. See you next week.